Mr. Mike Ayala, welcome to the Rich Equation podcast.
Brother, I am so excited to be here. It's good times.
It is really good times. It's damn good to have you. I'm really excited for you to be here and for you to share with people. Right before we started recording, you made an anecdotal joke. I think I'm going to start playing big now, or I've finally made the decision to start playing big. What the hell have you been doing for the last 20 years of your life, bro? Come on, man.
Actually, what I said was I've decided to stop playing small.
Okay. Stop playing small. Let's actually start there, because you have taught me so much, and I have been blessed to know you for the last couple of years and call you a friend, and have learned so much about the way you think about life. And I'm going to get into that. I have a lot of good questions for you today. But you talk about that all the time, about how can we stop playing small? How can we think bigger? How can we ask better questions? How can we pattern interrupt? And I really, every time I think about those questions or those patterns of thinking in my life, I think about you. I really do. You know, what would Mike say right now in terms of how we're thinking smaller? Where should we be thinking bigger? Where should we be asking better quality questions? Or what patterns of thinking are we stuck in, and where should we interrupt? I just immediately go to Mike. And so I am excited to get into the thought patterns of those things with you today. And you've learned so much as well. And so, yeah, what's showing up for you right now?
This is why I love having conversations like this, by the way, because I feel like we get into like this bubble, right? And so there's this big conversation, and rightly so, that we've been hearing for the last few years, and when we have social media and the world is at our fingertips, the comparison game is something that we never want to play. So you and I have talked about this, like, don't compare your day one to somebody else's year 20, and all that is right. And we shouldn't be comparing like keeping up with the Joneses, or comparing ourselves to, our neighbor or somebody else on social media. But the thing that I've been thinking about is I also should not be comparing me today to Mike of yesterday. I should not be comparing me today of Mike of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera, because, and actually, I think we should bring it even more current. Like I said, the Mike of a year ago, I'm not competing against him anymore. I'm competing against Mike today. And that's the thing. Like, we spend so much time talking about, not comparing ourselves to other people, and we should not do that. But the reality is I'm in competition with one person, and that's just the better version of me today. And so that's what's coming up for me. That's what I've been thinking about. And Kara and I want to kind of plug this, because this is probably more than anything what has spawned this. We have to be very, very cognizant of seasons in life. And this is one thing that I've really been thinking about, because when I go back to, there's a lot of talk about, little Ash when he was like 3 and 5 and 7. A lot of people doing the work, around little Mike, and, the Mike that was, didn't have a dad who was present, and whose dad was an alcoholic and all of that. Well, yeah, we need to deal with all of that. And you and I have a mutual coach that we've worked with, Dr. John, who helps me with a lot of that. But the reality is, man, little Mike is so far in my path, and I'm not saying it isn't relevant, but the reality is, I think sometimes there's this big Grand Canyon between, that little Mike and that version of ourselves that we're always thinking about. And then also the Mike who was, 23 years old, who had, 3 little kids, quit his job, started his business, and went on this journey of investing for freedom. Like, how do I build a business? How do Kara and I build businesses and stay present and be there for our kids? And how do I make sure that I'm home every day? Which all these books, Who Not How, and the great, wisdom that Dan Sullivan brings us, Gap in the Gain, and all this stuff is like part of that journey. But the thing that I've been thinking about, Ash, is like, that version of Mike who spent the last 25 years raising kids who are now 22, 20, and 18, he's dead, man. Like, that whole season, I'm not there anymore. And Karen and I have been talking about this a lot. So when I said, I'm ready to stop playing small, we're half joking about it, but at the same time, like, we have to pay really close attention to the seasons we're in. And some of your audience might be entering a season where they need to be present, and they need to be there with their kids, and they need to learn how to replace themselves in their business, so that, they're devoting as much time and energy and effort to their family at home, or maybe they're in a season where, they can spend more time with friends or whatever the season is. But for Kara and I realized that at the age of 21, I had my first child. Kara and I had been married for a year. And then we, every 2 years we had a kid. And then now my kids are like these adult children and we're in a different season. And Kara and I have been talking about this, and it's like, Ash, I feel like I jokingly said I'm ready to stop playing small, which I don't think we've played small.
Yeah.
I really feel like I'm entering a season where, man, I don't really feel like there's a whole lot that can constrict me, because we did it, man. We ran successful businesses. We built an investing portfolio, if you will. I was present for my kids. My kids have seen the world. We ate dinners together. And I feel like I'm entering a season where I can just go for it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I think you're spot on, and it took a different direction than I thought, but you're absolutely right. And I feel like and I'll just speak for myself. And it's why I love having you on the podcast, because it gets so real so fast. For me, myself, I definitely come from a place of like, I want all of it. I want to be, I shouldn't say I want all of it. I feel like I can do all of it. And frankly speaking, that's just not true. Mm. And so what I end up doing is overexerting myself with energy that's not sustainable, to be everywhere at all times. And then to forget about playing small, but you're right, like to play bigger or ask those questions. I thought it was interesting, your framework of the Grand Canyon, about the way that we deal with the work, the things that prevent us from moving forward in our life is often our childhood. And then we do that and we're like, oh yeah, okay, I did it. And that's it. And what's showing up for me now in my season is because I've done a lot of that work, as you have. And Dr. John has been super instrumental in that. But now I'm like, well, I already dealt with that. Now what? I still am not. What's the next level? What's the next step? And it's not dealing with my 5-year-old all the time. It's you're right. It's my 3 months ago, Ashish, of like the pattern breaking and the where am I stuck and why am I stuck there, and those types of questions that now I am toiling with.
Yeah, and I think again, it's just important to just keep doing the work too, because and this might seem somewhat irrelevant, but it's what's on my mind, so I'm going to bring it up. Even, a couple of weeks ago, we had a bunch of the couples in for the Next Level Couples event, and we did some breathwork stuff. And, Ed Milet wrote a book recently called The Power of One More, I think it's called. And in there, he talks about, not just in the book, but he says this all the time, there's one person in every generation or every family that's the one that changes, the trajectory and the destiny and the direction of a family. And I've thought about that, and even so for myself, a lot of people don't know this, but I'm Mike Ayala, but Ayala is actually my stepdad's name. It's not my real last name. And I don't know why I'm talking about this right now, but we'll just go here. But a couple of weeks back, I was thinking about this, and my stepfather, who's my dad to me, him and my mom got married when I was like 10, and it took a while to kind of integrate, but he's become my dad. So Ayala is a name that I took. It's kind of funny because when I moved from Idaho to Nevada, I just went and signed up for school and I just changed my name. Like I didn't even.
It wasn't a thought.
No, I didn't actually get, adopted. I didn't legally change my name. In fact, when Kara and I got married, we were going on a trip to Indonesia, and in order to get my passport, I had to go legally change my name because they're like, you're not Mike Ayala, you're Mike Beltran. And which is the craziest thing to think about. But anyway, the reason why I'm saying all this is when we think about Ed Milet's comment of the power of one more, I was just thinking about this recently. And this goes back to just doing that work and constantly reflecting on, those little versions of us. And again, I don't know where this is going to go, but I had this realization that Tino, my stepdad, he's the one in his family. Like he's the one that changed the lineage and the direction. And I've always thought, I always thought when I heard, like, I'm the one, like, I feel like I'm the one that changed the trajectory and the direction and everything else. But I had this realization, Ash, just just thinking about constantly, the reason why I'm sharing this is like constantly revisiting those deep parts of us. And how is it relevant? It really isn't, other than this doesn't mean anything to any of the listeners. What it means is like me constantly connecting back to my identity. So my stepdad is the one in his family that changed the trajectory of their entire lineage and future, which means I can't be the one, but I'm the one in the Beltran lineage that changed that. And I just had this realization. And what does it really mean? You might be like, well, Mike, this is semantics. It doesn't really mean anything. It means everything, because it's the identity that we connect with. And that's what's the important part of whether we're journeying back to visit little Ashish when he's 3 or 5, which I bet you were a cute little guy, man. That was just a little side note. But whether it's connecting to that version or ourselves 3 months ago or 3 weeks ago or whatever, the important part of that is the reason why we're connecting back to that is an identity for today. So what difference does it make if Mike's the one or Tino's the one that changed the Ayala lineage? Actually, nothing in the big picture. The only thing that really actually matters is what actually happens and how do I think about it. So the fact that, I identify with the one that changed the legacy and the future of my family for years and years and years is the only reason that really matters. So that's why it's also important that we're constantly, whether we're visiting, the little trauma and the issues and the things that we had to deal with when we were 3, or whether it was 3 days ago or 3 weeks ago, that's the importance of it. Because in order to move into that next phase or wherever it is we need to go, we need to be dealing with the mindsets that are keeping us from moving into it.
Mm-hmm. It is all about identity. Getting stuck with identity. Do you find yourself reverting back to an identity that just keeps showing up? Like no matter how intentional you are to reinvent or to reestablish or break patterns, it somehow is, and I don't want to use this incorrectly, but like there is a default identity that keeps showing up. And I'll kind of frame this question this way. There are really strong disruptions that I have attempted in my life, and I'm not going to say they were failures, but there were things that I thought, okay, I really need to change and physically move identity this direction. And with a lot of energy and a lot of disruption, I've done those things, but there are always things that show up again as recurring. I don't want to. It's almost like they're part of the identity that they're defaults. They're not wrong. You cannot get rid of those things. They're just, and you sometimes judge as like, oh shit, I'm back there again. Mm-hmm. And so would love to kind of hear your perspective of that as you evolve into those next layers of who you are.
So I'm going to approach this from a couple different perspectives because I have a few different thoughts on this. So number one, I've been interrogating my calendar like never before. Like my calendar is in an interview room with 2 detectives and like chained down and getting interrogated, like, because everything that's on my calendar is either, serving me or not serving me. And everyone who's on my calendar is either serving me or not serving me and my future and those people that need me, that are connected to not only my destiny, but theirs. And so if there's someone or something that's on my calendar that isn't falling into my, my true destiny. And when we talk about like not playing small, the reason why I'm sharing this is because when I talk about interrogating my calendar, this is a big part of me right now. And so when you ask that question, when I go all the way back to when I launched my company in 2004, there's been one thing that I've struggled with from the very beginning as a professional and as an entrepreneur. And that's organization. It's living by a calendar. It's, making sure that I'm on time, that, I'm living by that literally, religiously. And what I've realized recently, and this is a practical answer to your question, and then I'll talk about another component that I'm peeling the onion back on now. One thing that I've realized is that I've been fighting this since 2004. So almost 20 years. And it's not that it didn't exist as a pattern in me before that. It's just that I was in the field. I was a teenager.
Do you mean the practical organization of staying disciplined or organized as an entrepreneur? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. And even my desk.
And even your desk. Yeah. I hear you.
You don't get to see it because I don't want you to see it. But I'm just messy. I'm unorganized. And so the reason why I'm going to that practical version, this is something that I've fought and I finally realized, you know what? I'm not putting any more energy on this.
But yeah, keep going.
Well, no, if you got,
well, I mean, I wonder, and I hear you on that. And I wonder if that is the genius of you, and you have to stop looking at it like in, inadequacy, rather than a part of what makes you successful is your ability to live in messy and to find thoughtfulness in messy rather than being the alternative.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you nailed it. And so the version of that is like, I think there's different, and again, I'll peel back an onion on a different story. Sometimes I think we need to press further in to areas that we need to change. And sometimes we need to stop pressing. So that was my
that's
version.
right.
I'm just done with that. Like, it'd be better to have 2 or 3 people around me that are compensating for that and let me stay in that zone of genius rather than trying to constantly change and fight who I am. And by the way, this could apply to your marriage. This could apply to your children. Karen and I, again, we have adult children, but I think one of the things that we did well is leaning into their zone of genius. Like, what are they really, really good at? And not trying to change them in the way that we wanted them to be, or even in areas like this. When I fast forward to like my oldest son, Dylan, he has a lot of my traits. He's messy, he's unorganized, he's very entrepreneurial. Then you look at Tim, who's also entrepreneurial, but he's very organized. Like, his room's always clean. So, we get some of these like traits from our
natural. It's some of like natural inherent things. They're not. Yeah.
But also trying to change that in us, referring back to like little Mike or little Dylan, or even our employees, like, and there's a million ways we could go with this, but we've been taught for so long, to like go into an employee review and try to, here's the 1 or 2 areas where you did really good, but these are all the things where you're doing bad. And let's work on this stuff, rather than, also helping our employees to compensate around their zones of genius as well. And so I think about this so many ways. And I've been like dealing with Mike. This kind of brings it back to that 3-year-old Mike, because who Mike was when he was 3 is a lot of who Mike was when he was 12, is a lot of who Mike was when he was 24, when he started his company. And it's a lot of who Mike was today. And so I've spent the last 20 years of my career trying to, change these certain things of me. And I just woke up a while back and I'm like, you know what? I'm no longer doing that. I'm going to stay, as you said, in my zone of genius and roll with this. So there's versions of us that by the way, I'm not giving us all an excuse to just not deal with our bullshit, if you will.
That's true. That's not what you're doing. Yeah, you're right.
Because there is some things that we really need to work on. But at the end of the day, the other side of this is like, there's parts of us too in the past that have become the strengths. And this is what I was talking about with seasons. I realized, and Kara and I have been talking a ton about this, as I said, my default answer is no, can't do that. Can't meet with you. Can't, go on.
That's really different than a season ago for you, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing that I wanted to point out from the other side was like, this whole last year, and you and I talked quite a bit this last year, and it was like, I didn't go to any GoBundance events. I wasn't going to the local chapter meetings. Dude, I thrive on my goals list right now is lunch once a week with someone, not just lunch, but a breakfast, dinner, whatever, because I thrive on being with people.
Yes.
Yet this entire last year, like my default answer was no, because I had so much going on at work and in business, and we had relocated and also, Ash, I had built this thing in my brain that this is my last year with my daughter. The boys are getting older. I need to spend as much time with them as possible, which is all true. But because of all these things, my default answer became an even stronger no. And then I found myself dying because I'm not out.
You were not fed.
Yeah. And so I think sometimes from both angles, sometimes we need to go deeper and work on the things that we need to get better at. And sometimes we need to kill some of the things that made us great in the past that are keeping us from going where we need to go. So it's all seasonal and it's different for everybody. But I think we need to look at, what's serving us in a positive way and what's serving us in a negative way. And just because it's something you worked really freaking hard on 3 years ago to change in your life doesn't mean it's valuable in serving you today.
One of the reasons why I love having a podcast and listening to your podcast and others is that it just takes somebody sharing a story of what you just processed and what you've learned in that experience to be like, oh, where does that show up in my life and how you can apply it. But one of the things I respect most about you is, and even when you speak, you can hear it in your voice, is like you're so thoughtful about the patterns of your thinking. And my question is, do you spend time intentionally thinking? Or is it that you just observe, you're just so aware of yourself and the behaviors that you enact every single day, and you watch yourself and you ask questions of like, is this serving me? Is it not? Am I happy? Am I not? Is this a waste? Do I feel like it's a waste of time? Why? Or is it, do you really like meditate on your time because you are a thinker. You really do ask really profound questions, not of yourself, but of others and of society. And you like to go deep, but I really want to know the process for Mike Ayala in his thinking.
There's a scripture in the Bible that I've thought about for years. And for anybody that doesn't care about the Bible, just stick with me for a second, because I think there's wisdom in all of the words. Paul made this comment in the New Testament that I read years ago, like probably 20 years ago, that said, pray ceasingly, pray without ceasing. And ever since I heard that, I thought to myself, because what you think about is, like you're in a church and you're down on your knees and you're praying ceasingly. Like, what good is that to anybody? Nothing. Like, that's not good for anyone. So I actually dug into that years ago, and I've thought about this for many, many years. And there's actually a great book called Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, which, again, I'm not advocating the Bible or Buddhism or Hindu. I'm not advocating any of that. Michael Singer's, deep meditation. I love Michael Singer, but when you read Untethered Soul or The Surrender Experiment, which are probably two of my favorite books, it kind of ties into what I was saying about Paul saying, pray ceasingly. What does that mean? And so to answer your question, like, I've thought about this for so many years, because when we think about praying ceasingly, the word pray means communicate, like communion, in communication. How many times have you been sitting with Sejal or your kids and nobody's saying anything, but you're in communion? We're energy, right? And we can feel that. And so when I think about praying ceasingly, without going too far off the rails here, what I think about even with Untethered Soul is that voice that's in our head that's constantly thinking. And even as you and I are having a conversation, I can be fully present and be having a secondary conversation here. The reality is most of us can't do that without a lot of work, because a lot of times, like, we've got this one track mind where if I'm listening to you, I can't also be processing this. And so I check out. But I think I've become pretty good, even in my own mind, of having
multiple conversations.
Exactly. And so a lot of us would think that, maybe Mike's a little bit crazy, which maybe Mike is a little bit crazy. But also I think it's just getting in touch with that. And just from a practical perspective, we've heard this so many times that, and I don't know what the scientific truth on this is, but that we only use a certain percentage of our brain, 15, 18%, whatever that number is. And then you look at people like Einstein, Steve Jobs, they tapped into even more. And Dr. John would, really teach us this. I think the more we can tap into our depth of subconscious, there's so much memories and depth of who we are and just years and years and years that are in there. And the more that I think we can meditate and get into that zone of quiet, I don't think we have to, by the way, sit in a corner with our legs crossed and the lights off in order to tap into that. I think we can silence our mind even throughout the day.
With our eyes awake. Yeah. With our eyes open.
Yes. So I think that's really the thing. To be a deep thinker, you just have to think deeper. That's all it is.
Yeah. So good. Well, like I said, anytime I need to ask better quality questions or interrupt you're the first call I make, bro.
Appreciate that.
I want to get your perspective on, You have your own podcast, Investing for Freedom podcast, which I recommend to people all the time. And you have the privilege of talking. I want to get a little practical for the listener now about, you meet with successful entrepreneurs and all types of different businesses, asking, really important questions about investing and freedom in life and how to grow your business and how to think about entrepreneurship. What are you seeing as the patterns for entrepreneurs today? What are people struggling with? What are the questions that people are asking, and what are people dealing with today?
I literally mapped out a solo episode that I'm going to record on my podcast coming up on, the most important thing you can do right now is just bring it back to the basics.
Yeah, I love that.
And this might be the thread of what we're kind of really talking about today too, because even when we get a little bit woo-woo into the brain and silencing and there's so many voices and there's so much information. You can't turn on YouTube, Instagram, CNN, Zero Hedge. You can't get into your inbox without just getting inundated with propaganda and even spin on the actual numbers and the truth of what's going on out there. And I simply took a chart the other day that was, the MMT, the money supply over time. And then when 2008 hit, to 2020,
I saw that. Yeah.
It was like going up, right? But then when 2020 hit, it was like exponential. And I said, if we just took this chart and we just turned it upside down and called it an affordability chart, it would do the exact opposite. So affordability goes down, 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 and then a little bit more extreme and then off a chart. So we have all these talking bobbleheads that sound really smart. And like you said, you get around a ton of really, really smart people. I do too, because I think there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel, and the more ideas I can take and filter that, the better off I am. So what I would encourage your listeners is to, yes, get as much advice and wisdom from people that like, and trust and think, and people that have a track record, not just because they're good at speaking, and get as much information as you can, but then also just bring it back to the basics. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, because I've been saying this for a while. We don't like speculation. You and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago I called you up because I was like, I just want to know what's going on in the market. And, you're a guy that's we can hear all these different things about problems at the ports and supply chain and China. But if you want to know what's really going on, go talk to somebody that is buying from China.
Yeah.
And then you can get the real information, because, it's not lagging information. You just talked to somebody yesterday that's telling you how far things out, or I can tell, listen to CNBC telling me that we're going to die. And so for me, it's just come back to the basics. And again, we don't want to be speculators in times like this, but to me, everything is speculation. So what I'm trying to get my hands and my head around right now is, what are the, even if you talk to young Mike as a young real estate investor, as a young business owner / operator, what would Mike be concerned with 20 years ago? How do I get better at sales? How do I get more leads? How do I, tighten up my operations and trim 2 or 3% from the bottom line? The things that used to consume me as a young entrepreneur because it was new and I didn't know what the heck was going on. And, that's so far in my past, but maybe I need to be reconnecting to those simple ABCs of business, especially in times like this. I was literally on an investor call with a guy a few hours ago that's an existing investor, and it was supposed to be a Zoom call. And he was like 3 minutes late, and he's never late. And so I looked in the thing and it said, call me. In the notes, it said, call me. In the Zoom meeting notes, in the calendar, it said, call me when you're ready. So I had to go look up his phone number, and I actually called him, and I was like, hey, I apologize for being late. I was on the Zoom meeting. And he's like, I can't believe we live in a world where I have to be sitting in front of a computer in order to just be able to talk to you. And he went on this 5-minute rant about calendars and technology and all the different systems that he has to log into just to see his. So from my perspective, I think I'm doing a great job as an operator, giving my investors a portal and Zoom, and they can see my.
And he just wants to pick up the phone and call you on your cell and call it a day.
Yeah. And so bringing it back to the basics, I was just using that as an analogy, because
you're right.
In this time, in this day and age, we are so wound up in, FTX and Bitcoin. And when it comes to speculation, a part of our portfolio should be that. But really, it's times like this, Ashish, where I think we just need to come back to the basics and say, okay, where can I put my money? Where can I keep my money safe? Where can I keep my money moving? How can I make sure that my job's secure? Well, maybe show up, actually go to the office. Like, we're living in such a crazy time where even our bosses we can't even really see insight into how productive employees are. And so honestly, like, if I was an employee today, even if I didn't have to go to the office once or twice a week, you better bet your butt and I'm in the office once or twice a week, just so that my boss can see me and know that I exist and I'm not just some little computer, avatar on the other side.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, totally. But it's bringing it back to the basics.
You're totally right. I think what's funny and what's showing up for me as you say that is, you're right, is that there's two things. Number one is we have to get better at looking for real information. What is real? Not what we're being fed. And I think today, because the blessing of information and how efficiently information flows, we get data, we get information wherever it comes from, and we consider it to be real. Forget about relevant or timely. We just believe it to be real. And then I think there's something that going back to basics does for you to go and pick up the phone and call somebody and say, okay, what's really happening? Why are you biased? Where are your influences, and why are you having these opinions and thoughts? And are you incentivized to give me this information, or are you not, right? And I think that, especially in real estate, like that's really prevalent, right? Like, people that you think are giving you real information are incentivized to give you the information that will lead you a certain way. So I think that is showing up for me. And the second thing that is really coming up is that when you are a young entrepreneur, there is nothing you think you cannot do. You do everything. You get the sale. Everything is broken and everything you want to fix. And then as you mature as an entrepreneur, you forget about all those 101 things. You're like, oh, we're doing okay. We do well. That's incremental. It's too much energy to get that incremental benefit. Let's not focus on that. And I think that really is and I'm there. We're there now in our business. And I'm really asking these questions of, where do we need to go back to basics to have that curious energy again? Just super fascinating, but you're right.
And I think, even back to seasons, I think even as business owners and entrepreneurs, and
that's totally right.
We just have to be aware of the season we're in, because there's seasons of exponential growth and opportunity where maybe those, the basic questions don't matter, because we're in such a time of expansion and growth and opportunity that we should be swinging for the fences. But then there's periods of time where we need to regroup and we need to reorganize. And, I would love to have, just kind of like a slow trending upline, but the reality is business is like this, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this so many times, and I don't want to go off the train tracks on this too, but just understanding that guys like you are wartime leaders. Like, when stuff is crazy, you thrive. Yeah. But then when things are just okay and mediocre, we tend to try to break things and stir things up.
I'm looking for another war right now. It's not good.
Yeah. And sometimes that war will come to you no matter what. And so we just need to be kind of patient, because it's coming anyway. Just let everybody regroup, but I'm so bad at that. And, Dan Sullivan says this all the time, and it's stuck with me forever. The eyes only see and the ears only hear what the brain is looking for. And if there's one thing with everything that we're talking about today, whether it's, the thinking about your thinking, the depth of the conversation that goes on in your conscious and subconscious, or even, the periods of time that we're going into, the reason why I love talking to you is because the eyes only see and the ears only hear what the brain is looking for. So when I'm looking for information and data that's real time, my eyes and my ears begin to hear that. And so that's when guys like you are so important to me, because you've got real time data. And so bringing it back to the listeners, what is your brain looking for? Because if we're looking for, inefficiencies and problems in our people or businesses, et cetera, we're going to find that. But if we're looking for opportunities for growth and all of that, we're going to find that as well. So understanding what season we're in, when we're going into a season of extraordinary expansion and growth, we need to make sure that we're not looking for, the things that are basic things that are going to move the needle by like 0.5% or whatever. We're looking for 10, 15, 20% increases. But when we're going into periods of time, like maybe we need to be looking at those 1 or 2% things that move the needle, but also be prepared for, because wealth is made in times like what we're coming up against too. It's just what side of the coin are you going to be on, right?
Totally. And I was going to ask you this question earlier. I feel like in times of stability, because I thrive in war. I really do. And I feel like when things are falling apart, the ability to go back to basics and pivot quickly is one of my strongest skill sets. But then when you find stability and consistency, I'll call it, I get agitated. I almost am my own worst enemy. And my team knows this, and my fellow leaders know this, and my partners know this. And I've been able to surround myself with people that sort of insulate that and make sure I don't create more damage than I need to create in times of stability too. It's like sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy. But when I think about investing, it's sort of the same. And I think that and what I want to ask you is, right now this is a very uncertain time. And I think in times of uncertainty in the markets, there are more opportunity than less. Mm-hmm. And in your perspective, is not investing a strategy? And when do we need to know when we're being patient and wise, or that our patience is actually not wise, but it's fear, or it's showing up like, am I making any sense? Because I think the narrative can be self-fulfilling too. It's like, well, there's going to be a ton of opportunity. Let's wait for the perfect opportunity. And then you end up waiting forever. And then, like in 2000, during COVID, that was the narrative. And people did make a lot of money, but they also lost a ton of money. Mm-hmm. And if you missed like a 4-month window, you were out.
Yep.
So people said it. But if you were patient just 4 months, you missed the opportunity. And so I'm really interested in to hear your thoughts about the psychology of investing during these times, and when and what we should be watching for in the thinking of. And it's not just investing. It's really, what I mean by this is really when we should take action and when we shouldn't take action.
So whether it's business or whether it's real estate, I'm always investing.
Yeah. You're always a buyer.
Yeah. And I think, nobody wants to, this comes kind of back to the basic. We want, like, Matt King from GoBundance shared this, the economic clock with me. Have you ever seen the economic clock?
No.
Remind me and I'll send it over to you. But basically 12 o'clock is like when the economy is the best, and 6 o'clock is when it's the worst. And so where are we on the clock? We are probably somewhere at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on the clock, right? You do not want to be buying at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, maybe, 6 o'clock. If you could time 6 o'clock to the button, buy. But nobody can do that.
Right.
And so, I have a couple of thoughts when you're saying this. And one of the things when it comes to reconciling real estate, there is so much cash sitting on the sidelines, to your point. Being in GoBundance, like, there's a conversation all the time. Like, so many people are sitting on so much money waiting for opportunities. And I sit back and I wonder, okay, well, if there is X amount, let's say there's $1 trillion sitting on the sideline just waiting for opportunities, and 30% of that money is going to rush in at 6 o'clock, and 30% of that money is going to rush in at 7 o'clock, and 30% of that money is going to rush in at 8 o'clock, and then the rest rushes in at 9. I just start to wonder where, if a bunch of money starts coming in when real estate dips a little bit and prices start coming down. I literally heard a realtor the other day that I know on Instagram talking about, right now, this is what she said, right now is the best time to buy real estate as an investor. And I was like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, because I don't know. I don't think it's probably the best time to buy real estate. Is it a good time to buy real estate? Yep, I think so. As long as you get the right real estate deal, right? As long as you have the right financing. There's this phrase, and I'll keep this somewhat simple, but I heard, I think David Osborne say this a couple years ago, that there's a time coming where debt is the new asset. So if you think about this, imagine right now if you went and bought a $3 million, commercial facility that cash flows like, let's say it cash flows 7%, but it has 3 3/4 debt on it, and you can assume that debt. And you can buy that for $3 million, or you could go buy that same building for $5 million, but you have to refinance out the debt. So is it a good deal? Or maybe you could buy the building for $2 million even. Forget about the numbers. Is a building a good price or a good deal at a certain price? It depends on the terms and it depends on the cash flow. And so I think we're actually in a period of time where if you can assume debt from sellers that have debt, or if you can assume buildings from sellers that have debt in place, and it's old debt at 3.25%, 3.5%, 4%, maybe that makes a deal a home run, even if the price is kind of high, but you've got 20-year locked in debt that you can assume or create a partnership with him or whatever. So when I think about investing, I think it's always a good time to buy as long as the deal terms are right. And then there's times too where, people are paying at the top of the market, but they need the building and the building fits their needs. And if they built this building, it would take 3 years to build it. That's 3 years of time loss. And so I don't know, that's a roundabout answer to, is it a good time to invest? I think it's always a good time to invest. And if you're trying to time that market, my thing is if we see a 15% or a 10% dip in real estate, how much money is going to come rushing in off the sidelines that's going to stop that real estate implosion that everybody's thinking about? I don't know the answer to all of this. I think debt and affordability is a big part of this whole equation. But I have a feeling that banks and the Fed and all of that are going to figure it out with, 40-year mortgages and maybe 40-year amortizations with 20-year balloon payments. I think there's other instruments that can be at play that may make what looks like a bad deal yesterday or today look really good.
Like a good deal.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're right that there is really no timing of it. To be a buyer over a longer period of time and doing it consistently is probably more important than trying to time it or trying to find the perfect 1 or 2 deals.
When I think about real estate, if you would ask me a year ago, because we even did some real estate courses and stuff, and I was kind of like, I even put the course out and then I was like, this is a horrible time for people to be buying real estate.
I remember you mentioning that to me. Yeah, you were talking about that. Like, do I need to pivot my message?
Yeah, and it was so hard, but right now is the best time for entry. And I'm not trying to sell the course because actually I don't even know where you would go get the course right now. So it's not about that. If I was getting started or ever wanted to get started in real estate, I would be doubling down on my education right now because there is going to be.
This is the time.
Yeah. It's a great time.
And that's a really good point too, is in terms of education and timing of education. It's not even timing of your investment. Is you should be educating yourself before there's an opportunity to invest. And this is the time to do those things.
Well, and just like back to what Dan Sullivan said, the eyes only see and the ears only hear what the brain is
so good
for. So if you're not programming yourself, what does a good real estate deal look like? My first real estate mentor, Dolph DeRoos, got me so excited about real estate. And he always said the deal of the decade comes along every week. You're just not looking for it, or you don't know how to identify it. And that's the thing that Dan Sullivan's saying too. The eyes only see and the ears only hear what the brain is looking for. So when we're having these conversations, it's just about reprogramming our mind to try to identify, what does a good human look like? What does a good boss look like? What does a good employee look like? What does a good company to go to work for look like? What does a good real estate investment look like? When is a good time to invest in real estate? These are all things that the brain's looking for. And the more you educate yourself, the more you're going to know when you see it, what it is that you're looking for.
So good. I want to end on that.
Okay.
What else?
I think just be really, really aware of the seasons that you're in and the seasons of things that are going on around you.
I'm so proud to call you my friend, brother.
Me too, honestly.
Say hi to Kara. Thank you so much for doing this with me. Listeners, you can follow Mike on Instagram. He's really popular and active on Instagram at the Mike Ayala. And we'll put all your links in. And he has a beautiful podcast called Investing for Freedom. I'm doing the plug. You can do it too if you want. But the Investing for Freedom podcast by Mike Ayala. And Just such a knowledgeable guy, as you can see, and just a thoughtful leader, a thoughtful investor, and a thoughtful man. So I just appreciate you being here, Mike. And thanks so much, brother.
Yeah. I say this a lot, but I mean it with you. You're one of my favorite humans. You and Sejal are just awesome people.
Thanks, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.